Hello and welcome back, artists and designers. We are working our way through our shading practice, kind of getting our basics going here in Photoshop. So we set up our brushes in our last video. We're going to go in and I just wanted to talk a little bit about additive and subtractive shading, and then we'll get in and start to work with a sphere and get that happening. So I'm going to head back over to this document here that I created. I'm going to zoom out and I just want to show you here. So if we're working only with black right now, if I hide the backgrounds, you'll see the checkerboard shows up. So you can see that we're relying on the white of the paper to be the highlight right now. And you can even see that even in the dark areas, I didn't get 100% opacity with my black. And that's okay. I just wanted to kind of demonstrate that. So let's add in, what if we wanted a different color paper? I'm going to add a new adjustment layer. And I'm going to do a solid color. And I'm going to go ahead and pick something light, similar to what I have in the example here. So let's go with like a light blue kind of gray color. Obviously, the darker your paper is, the more that's going to affect the way that the values read. So let's do like a nice light blue right there. So let's do one more type, because we did basically additive shading here, which was we had a rectangular selection made. And I'm going to make sure that I'm working back on this layer. We had a rectangular selection made, and we just used the soft brush to kind of create that. We did that again, and that time we used the soft eraser to subtract some of the pigment off of there. So let's do this one more time with black and white. So let's try that. Let's grab our brush, make sure that we have our soft shader selected, and we do. And let's go ahead and just start to kind of build that up. So I'm going to bring in my dark tones. I'm going to fade over, hide this brush here, and work up a little bit more aggressive down to this lower end, work my way across. Now the difference is I'm going to switch over to white. So as long as you have white in the background, quick key on the keyboard, X, switch over to white, and I can start to bring that highlight in and fade that over, and now I'm getting actual gray values. So I'm going to switch back over to black, and you just kind of have to balance that out and go back and forth until you really kind of get that tone that you want. Now you could sample from the gray in the middle if you are having trouble, but if you set up your brush the right way, we should be able to get a pretty good black to white transition there. So you can see how that affects differently if you have the color of the paper something different, because if I hide that, it really looks the same as the other two, but you can see that this one is not relying so much on the transparency of that paper to be the highlight value. Okay, let's try working with a sphere. So the easiest way is if we click the elliptical marquee and we grab that and you hold down the shift key and you get that nice perfect circle created. There we go, we have a circle right now. And if we take our soft shader, and you want to work depending on where the light's coming from. So let's say it's coming in this direction. You want to work in a curved fashion. So I'm picking up my brush and I'm kind of working my way around, and I'm able to get that nice kind of soft transition from dark to light. I'm going to work it up here a little bit darker down below. And again, working my way around, following the form of that sphere to highlight the rounded nature of it. And that looks pretty good to me. Now, if I really want to go back and get that reflected kind of highlight on this, I could switch back over to white. I could maybe make my brush a little bit smaller, and I could go in here and just start to kind of pop in that really bright highlight on the edge there. And you can kind of see how that's working. Again, that's relying a little bit on the transparency. If I hide both of those layers, you can see that there is a lot of transparency there. I'm going to show you another way to do this. We could do the same thing with subtractive shading. I'm going to do that real quick. So if I take that selection and I basically take let's take the hard shader this time, grab that hard shader and block that in. Whoops. Block that in with black, so I can quickly kind of put that in there, nice and dark, and then I could grab my soft eraser and a couple clicks and I could probably get this to show up here. So I could start to lighten that up, and you could get that same thing happening with a subtractive shading here. So erase, 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 and lighten that sphere up. And if that's easier for you, you could use that method, the subtractive shading, and there you go. All right, last thing I want to talk about is working with something other than a selection. Whoops. That was the bell there. So let's do one more. So if I take and I make a selection, and I don't want to keep this selected all the time. I want to be able to work on something different. And you could do this with any shape that you want that you hand paint or create, as long as it's got some hard edges to it. So I can take this paintbrush. I can take my, let's start with the white this time, and I block this in. And I'm going to go ahead, oops, I did something wrong here because I want to make a new layer. So let's copy this, delete that for a second, go on to a new layer, put that on there. So this is going to be on a new layer here. And what I'm going to do is I have my base shape on this layer. I can now deselect it. Okay, so that's the only thing on that layer. And I'm going to do a layer over top. So if I take my soft shader right now and I try to shade on this layer, let's see how this works. Oops, wrong thing here. Soft shader. And if I start to work on this, well, I'm doing it with white, and that's not what I want to do, so let's switch over to black. And I start to shade this, you're going to see, well, what's the point of this? Because it's going outside the lines. Well, if I make this a clipping mask, it's going to clip it right to this circle. So all I have to do is go over here, and if you hold down the Alt key, you'll see that little arrow pop up, or you can right click and say, hey, let's make it a clipping mask, and you can see, boom, it pops right to that. So what's really nice is now I don't have to stay in the lines anymore. And I already have the white kind of applied there, so I can just work up my value on that clipping mask layer, which is super helpful to make sure that you stay in the lines. If I unclip it, you'll see. So if I unclip, hold down the Alt key, unclip it, that's what it looks like without being clipped to the shape. And here it is being clipped to the shape. So that's a really nice, easy way to be able to get a solid edge to something that you want. So we have additive shading, subtractive shading, shading with black and white, shading using selections, and then the clipping mask option down there. So experiment with some of those and see how it goes, and I'll see you in the next video.